Maul Shadowlord Episode 7 and 8 are now out, and to describe them in one word, they're dark, but not in the way you think. In this video, I'm going to break down my honest thoughts about the two episodes and some key details that you might have missed. So let's get right into it. Episode 7 is titled Call to the Oblivion, and in my opinion, this is where we really start to see a large shift between Maul and his character. For the first 6 episodes, we saw him as the top dog and the guy that was really in control, even if he was hiding in the shadows. However, this is now where the shift begins. We start to see Maul slowly crack, and you'll see how. Episode 7 begins with Maul, Devon, and Riley just moments after they escaped Marok in the last episode. Like we saw, Maul keeps trying to lure Devon to his side more and more, and even now offers her a ship to get off-world. We spoke about this in our last video, but this kind of feels like something straight out of Palpatine's book. This approach is kind of how Palpatine was with Anakin. Calm, poised, but he approached him in a way that really made him rethink all of his morals and decisions. That's now what's kind of happening here between Maul and Devon. Just like Anakin, Devon knows that the Sith way is wrong and that Maul is a villain, but you can see that at small points she does consider what he says. It reminds me of that meme a bit that says, he's out of line, but he's right. That's basically Devon here. Whether or not she'll eventually join him is still unknown, but I could potentially see it happening by the end of the season maybe. So in time they all walk a bit, and by the time they get to their camp, Riley and Devon try to escape, and this is now where Maul snaps. As they try to escape, Maul finally loses his patience and tells her that she can't take this empire alone. So he gives her one final chance, join him and leave this planet, or of course die by the hands of the empire. However, Devon refuses and ignites her saber, so Maul uses the force to freeze her and force pushes Riley down to the ground. This sends Devon into an absolute frenzy, so she rushes towards Maul and the two begin to clash lightsabers. Now, this is around the second or third time now that Devon was really pushed over the edge and tapped into her rage and anger a bit. It's a bit unusual for a Jedi, of course, as she definitely seems to be one that doesn't have her emotions controlled, which is also kind of like Anakin. Anyways, she and Maul keep fighting, but not for long until the Empire eventually arrives. They began shooting at them, and in time they even captured Riley and took him hostage. Once again, Devon loses it and tries to rescue him, but she fails and falls down below, forcing her to go on the run again. Already, the intensity of this episode feels high. The Empire is only getting more and more involved, Riley's captured, and the relationship between Maul and Devon obviously shifted a ton. Nevertheless, this is where things get really insane. The scene then cuts to Marok, who stands in front of a transport that lands in front of him. And well, inside this transport is the 11th brother, or also known as the Crow, a masked, terrifying Inquisitor with red eyes. Now, we've actually seen the Crow before in Star Wars. He was first seen in the show Tales of the Jedi when he fought Ahsoka, but when Ahsoka sliced him down, he vanished into thin air, kind of like how Obi-Wan died. So just like Marok, this story is a prequel to his eventual death. Now, him appearing does mean something interesting though. Remember at the end of the last episode where Marok was speaking to someone he called my lord? Well, he wouldn't call the Crow that. My personal theory is that he contacted Vader, but instead of Vader coming to aid him, he sends another Inquisitor to help, and this Inquisitor is clearly the Crow. Vader's got enough going on at this point, and I feel like the missions he goes to are very selective. However, there is one exception for him, and that's Obi-Wan. In the Kenobi show, we saw him receive a report that Obi-Wan was spotted, and well, he showed up right away. He was thirsty for revenge against Obi-Wan, and he's all he consumed himself with. But someone like Maul is a bit different. Maul is like a small thorn in his skin. Yeah, he's a nuisance, but really he's irrelevant to him unless he starts to cause major chaos. Anyways, the scene then jumps to Devon, who's on the run, and she finally finds Lawson and Daki, who've also been trying to find her. Devon tells them that Riley was captured, and so now the new mission is to rescue Riley, and I feel like that becomes one of the main storylines over this and the next episode. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Maul and his crew finally break away and go to escape so they can get off-world, but their plan fails. Out of nowhere, they're confronted by the Empire once again, but this time with Marok and the Crow. Now this is where things get pretty insane. Out of nowhere, we get our first duel between Maul and the two Inquisitors, and they're all going back and forth. Maul's crew is fighting the Empire, and Maul himself is fighting the two Inquisitors, and everything just feels extremely action-packed. Unfortunately though, Maul eventually found himself in a bit of trouble. As they were fighting, Marok was able to injure Maul's leg, which left him pretty broken. Now we did see Maul deal with similar leg issues back in episode 4 when he fought Daki, so clearly this is an ongoing issue for him. So two of Maul's Zabraks, Icarus and Scorn, see that Maul was in trouble, so they left the scene to go help him. Unfortunately though, this was a big mistake. As they got there, the Crow was about to finish Maul off, and so out of nowhere, one of the Zabraks rushed in and saved Maul. However, unfortunately for him, the Crow got up right behind him and stabbed him right then and there. As he then fell off, his brother screamed in horror, and Maul looked at him the same way he did with Savage when he died over a year ago. You just see the hurt in his eyes, and it really must remind him of when he lost his own brother back then. Anyways, the fight then continues again, but Maul was just too broken and injured. He tried doing whatever he could, but it wasn't enough. So in time, the Inquisitors knocked him to the ground and were about to finish him off, even saying the words,
"The Emperor wants you dead."
As he said this, Maul then knelt there injured and broken, and honestly it looked like he was just about to give up, but then he says,
"Likewise."
From there, Maul used all his strength in the Force, pulling down all the rocks above him, screaming in anger, and crushing everything in sight. Now this scene was just absolutely insane, and it really shows Maul's power even when it looked like it was the end for him. However, there is something even more interesting here. What Maul did there was actually one of Palpatine's most crucial teachings. See, one thing that Palpatine believed in was to not purely rely on your lightsaber for combat, but instead to also use the dark side as a weapon. An example of this is using outside objects to your advantage. This is why we see him throw all the Senate pods down at Yoda in episode 3, and in a comic at one point he teaches Vader this exact lesson. In a 1v1 duel with Vader, he also threw objects at him and used more to defeat him instead of just a lightsaber. So we can only assume that Palpatine taught this lesson to Maul as well, and in this case he used it to his advantage. I thought this was a really cool detail, especially since they're talking about Palpatine during that scene. But anyways, the episode then ends and we jump into episode 8 called The Creeping Fear. Now the title of this episode is actually an interesting one because it has some meaning in the Star Wars galaxy. See, back before Revenge of the Sith came out, a lot of fans were wondering what the title for episode 3 would be, so George Lucas decided to troll fans. On April Fool's Day, he shared that the title would be called The Creeping Fear, and many fans actually fell for it. This of course didn't end up being true, as it was actually called Revenge of the Sith, but it makes for a cool Easter egg now considering they titled episode 8 with this. Anyways, the story continues just a few seconds after where we left off, as Maul then crushed down the rocks above him. However, the Inquisitors were quickly able to flee, and so did Maul. As he then jumped out of the cave though, he was crashing down and then did a spin and screamed. Sound familiar? Well, this is the same exact spin and scream that Palpatine did when he fought Windu and the other Jedi in Revenge of the Sith. Clearly, Palpatine taught him this move as well, and now Maul used this for his survival. Again though, another page out of Palpatine's book, which is pretty ironic considering how much hate he has towards him. Anyways, the story continues on as Maul's crew escapes the scene, but obviously has no sign of Maul. In the last episode, some of the Mandalorians on their crew double-crossed them, and as they tried to flee, their ship got shot down. So now the crew was without a ship, without some of their warriors, and without their leader, which was all pretty rough. Meanwhile, Maul was trying to find his own way out, but this is where we see some pretty crazy stuff. As Maul is injured and falls in front of a puddle, he looks below him and he actually sees himself as a young boy, as an innocent child. This was pretty crazy, since the only time we ever saw young Maul was in the comics, but this was just the start to a crazy episode ahead. It's like in a way, he's trying to push away his past and just forget about it. Almost like his past made him weak in a way. Anyways, he keeps walking, and eventually he finds the underground tunnels from earlier and he's able to escape. However, as he does, we see the unexpected. As Maul struggles to walk, he hears voices. Maul looks up, and as he does, he sees them in Savage's young boys, and Savage is begging for him not to leave, but Sidious pulls him away and starts cackling. Then his visions shift to Sidious training him as a boy, and as he does, he calls him pathetic and even tortures him with Force lightning. Then after that though, Maul then heard Obi-Wan's voice. This scream was the same exact scream Obi-Wan did when Maul killed Qui-Gon. So Maul then looked up once again, and then out of nowhere, a young Jedi with a green lightsaber attacked him. Then finally, Maul's vision shifted one last time. This time he saw him and Savage reunited when Savage found him years later in that cave. Then however, he witnessed Sidious kill Savage in cold blood. As Maul watched all this in horror, he looked broken, which is a side to him that we haven't seen many times. Then that sadness quickly turned into rage and he started screaming Sidious's name and yelled in anger that it was he who did this to him. Now this scene shows a lot because we never got to see on screen how Maul became Sidious's apprentice. For years in canon, it's been explained that Maul's mother, Mother Talzin, was supposed to be Sidious's apprentice at one point, but when Sidious laid eyes on Maul, he stole him for himself and recruited him instead. This is very similar to what we saw, as Sidious did the same exact thing by taking Maul. It's also been said in both legends and canon that Sidious tortured Maul on multiple occasions just so he'd be stronger in the dark side, and now that's exactly what we saw. In many stories, it's been said that Sidious would torture Maul physically, make him starve at times, and even throw him into harsh weather conditions just so he'd become stronger. This scene shows a lot, and most of all, it just proves how twisted and evil Sidious truly was. Personally, I love this scene, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the most powerful scenes that we've gotten in the show so far. As all this was happening with Maul, Lawson was with Devon and Daki, and they were trying to find a way to break out Riley from prison since he was captured last episode. At one point, Lawson even offers to turn himself into the Empire, and he contacts Two Boots that way he can make that deal. In his eyes, the Empire wants him, not Riley, so by making a deal like that, it should save his son. Personally, I like this, especially since we've seen Lawson kind of neglect his son throughout the show so far, so here it seems like he's really willing to do whatever he can for him. Anyways, his plan eventually works, and Two Boots helps free Riley from the prison, and he even turns against the Empire to make it happen, which was a pretty big shock. So with the help of Two Boots, Lawson was able to reunite with Riley, but since the Empire was on their tail, he wasn't able to really turn himself in, so they all escape together and the Empire is just after them. Meanwhile, as they're on the run, Maul is still on his journey through the tunnels, and we get to see yet another powerful scene. He's broken, injured, and he starts to become weak as he walks. Then he collapses to the ground and he sees himself as a child again. This time though, he wasn't filled with anger, but instead he apologized to his younger self, and he even has what looks like a tear run down his cheek. I personally can't tell if it was the water from the puddle or a tear, but I'd like to think that it was a tear since he's so emotional and broken right now. Then from there, he says something that blew my mind. As he looks at his younger self, he promises that he won't let Sidious do this to anybody else again. This line absolutely struck me, because as we all know, Vader is Palpatine's apprentice right now, and this leads me to believe that possibly Maul doesn't want Sidious hurting anybody else like how he hurt him. Maybe he wants to lend a hand to Vader and save him from Sidious's corruption. We already got a hint that Vader might be appearing, so it could make perfect sense. Anyways, Maul then picks himself back up, and in time he reunites with his fleet finally. As all that happened, Lawson, Daki, and the crew are trying to find a way to escape, and they end up getting help from Rena, Lawson's friend. She tells him that she can help get them off-world, and Lawson accepts this, but in time he learns it's a trap. This whole time, the Empire was holding her hostage and was using her to trap Lawson and the crew, but luckily Lawson was able to pick up on this quickly. So, he and everyone else were able to escape in time, and Rena was able to hold her own and attacked every Imperial in sight, then shooting down the transport. Because of Rena's help, Lawson and the group lived to see another day, and although we don't know what happens yet to Rena, I'd like to think that she escaped as well. The scene then cuts to Maul, who's with his group in Demas's old office and is using it as a current hideout. Then, Barrio gets a call from someone mysterious, but he has a smirky grin on his face. As he does, he goes up to Maul and tells him about this call, informing him that was a representative from the Crimson Dawn Syndicate. According to the representative, Dryden Voss requests an audience. Now, what this means is still unknown, but we do know who Dryden Voss is. Voss actually works for Maul in the movie Solo, all under the Crimson Dawn Syndicate. By that point, Maul is the leader of Crimson Dawn, so this could be how we see all that happen. As of right now, we don't know much, but it could very much be that it's connected to the show and something we'll see within the final 2 episodes. Personally, this was one of my favorite episodes of the series, and seeing Maul as vulnerable as he was and showcasing emotions like he did was something that really stood out to me. It truly shows the case of bad versus worse guys like Sidious and how much Sidious took everything from him and made his life miserable. In a way, you feel sorry for Maul, and even more than that, we also heard him say that he refuses to let Sidious do that to anybody else ever again. Like I said earlier, this could possibly mean Vader, since technically Vader is Sidious's apprentice right now. Perhaps he could be tied into the show through this, and Maul will try to sway him to stop following Sidious. I do think that we'll see him next week personally, especially since the 2 Inquisitors lost once again. They keep losing and losing no matter what they try, and Maul keeps on winning somehow, so maybe this could be where Vader had enough. Whether we'll see him or not is up for debate, but that's just my theory. But I want to know from you, what are your thoughts on episodes 7 and 8, and what are your hopes for episodes 9 and 10? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you always.